Welcome to another edition of the Practical Adjuster brought to you by FreeClaimInfo.com. My name is Jerry Adair. I'll be your host today as we go through the subject of taking statements. Taking recorded statements is like anything else in the claims business. It's purposeful and it's a process. So I'd like to talk about the purpose as we begin this discussion. Now, the purpose of taking a statement is twofold. The first part is you want to document the information that person can provide to you, whether they're an insured operator of a vehicle, maybe they're a witness to an incident of some sort, or maybe they're the claimant. It doesn't really matter. The concept is still the same. You trying to document as much information from that person as you can, what they're willing to tell you, what kind of information maybe they aren't willing to tell you. You're trying to get it all. You're trying to get their perspective, their bias, if any, those sorts of things. Okay. The second part is you're attempting to assess what type of witness they would make, because we all know that when these claims get in a situation where they can't settle or they won't settle, the next step is likely litigation. And if litigation occurs, you're going to have witnesses called. So maybe this person you're talking to is going to be a key witness. Whether they are or they aren't, you need to be able to establish what type of witness they'll make. Now, part of that is normal observations, but part of it is a little more subjective. So I like to start with their physical attributes. And I'll make notes about persons while I'm interviewing them or before or afterward. Maybe when I leave and I go back out to my car, then I'll sit down and I'll make notes, okay? However you choose to do it, the point is you need to write down as many things as you can while it's fresh on your mind. So things like tall, short, thin, overweight, head full of nice hair, bald-headed, beard, eyeglasses, smoking during the interview, visible tattoos, mannerisms, speech impediment, lack of communication skills. All those things are really not opinions so much as observations. And that's what you want. You want to be able to gather as many observations as you can, because these will become part of what you ultimately put together to provide to the person you're reporting to, or defense counsel, whoever it is, to give them your synopsis of this person's ability to be a witness. Whether they're going to be a favorable witness, a believable witness, or maybe the opposite of that. This is not the truthfulness of their words. It's just an assessment of how they're going to come across, because if they're presented in front of a jury, how would the jurors view that person? Would they believe them? You may think they're not being truthful, but you can also think that they're very convincing when they tell their story. That's important to know. On the other hand, they could be telling what you know to be true based on your investigation, but the way they present themselves and their communication skills or lack thereof is so poor that you find yourself really not believing that person. You want to believe them. You think the information is credible and true, but you just find that the way they present it is terrible, in your opinion. That's also important, because ultimately, if you make a decision and it rests upon a key witness, part of that assessment needs to be, if we don't pay this claim and it goes to trial and this person is called as a witness, are they going to help us or are they going to hurt us? If the answer is they're going to hurt you, maybe you need to rethink your position. That happens on occasion, okay? So you want to get as much information as you can so you can present your opinion to the person you're reporting to. It doesn't mean that you can't use that witness. It just means it's another part of the piece of information that you're trying to put together. Like any other part of a claim investigation, each task that we as adjusters do requires preparation. The statement is no different. So if you're prepared to take a statement and you haven't done your research, you haven't put your questions together, you're probably not ready. So my advice would be to postpone, delay it, do what you can to give yourself time to be prepared. Now, one of the components you want to talk about is whether you're going to do it in person or on the phone. Sometimes it's not practical to do it in person. They're at a great distance away or things of that nature. Maybe their schedule is so busy they just can't make the time to meet with you. Those things happen. So you make the best that you can do with what the circumstances are. But I would always say, if you can do it in person, that's always a better option. When it comes to claimants involved in a slip and fall injury, I would highly encourage you to do whatever is possible within your means to be able to do this in person, because you're going to gather some information you just won't pick up on the telephone typically. The next part is you want to have your questions prepared. So whether you use a list that you've got, if you don't have those lists, there are some on the Free Claim Info website that you can find, which will be a list of questions that might pertain to the specific incident that your claim is about. Okay, you can take that maybe as a starting point. I like to take that as a starting point even now, having done this for many years, and then add and take away from that as appropriate. There are things that I might need to add that guide doesn't have. That's okay. Maybe I'll change the order of the questions depending on what happens. Sometimes I'll save those most intrusive or nosy questions or personal questions to the very end, because I don't want the person to get angry and stop the interview during the middle and have to redo it. If you do those at the very end and they get angry and stop the interview, you've already gotten most of what you need, so you may not have to redo it. But things like, have you been drinking? Or had you been drinking when you were driving on this day? Or maybe do you have any criminal convictions on your record? Things that might make the person get a little uneasy, especially if those answers are yes. Okay, so those are kind of things I'm referring to that I will typically save those to the end. Otherwise, you can pick and choose, and I like to kind of move the questions around. I'll purposefully jump around in order of the questions, get off subject, back on subject, get on subjects that I know the answer to, jump back, keep them a little bit off guard. Again, if you're trying to assess their truthfulness, that's one way to do that. If somebody's making up the story as they go along, they have a hard time remembering it when you keep changing the subject and then going back to where you started from. Just a key point to remember. The last part is what I refer to as the pre-interview. And this is something that I will do when I get ready to take the statement, whether I'm in person or on the phone. I'll maybe give them a brief opportunity to say, please tell me briefly what happened, just so I kind of know where you're coming from. I was driving down the road and blah, 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 this happened. Okay, good. I think I understand it now. Now I may need to change some of my questions depending on what they said. Maybe they threw me a curve and they said something I wasn't expecting there. But whatever it is, at least you have that information. Make a note of it, act accordingly, and then move forward with your interview. Okay, if you've worked in the claim industry any length of time at all, you know that before you take a recorded statement from someone, you need to get their permission. Okay, there are many ways to do this, and I'm going to take you through the process that I utilize and the reasons why I do it the way that I do. So we'll start with why I do the permission statement that I'm going to explain to you in a minute. I like to keep it simple. So I don't want to make a big production. I don't want to make it seem as though it's such a big deal that this person who may have been relaxed and ready to talk because of what I say and the length of the permission and the way I go about it and those kind of things, it sort of makes them think it's a bigger deal than they thought it was before. And so, well, they might have been relaxed and sort of laid back and willing to talk like we're just having a casual conversation. Once I interject this big formal permission statement, they sort of get tense. Maybe they get a little reserved. They're afraid to say something. They don't want to say anything wrong, get themselves into trouble. Whatever their mindset is, you sort of put yourself behind the 8 ball. You made your job harder than it needs to be. So you keep it easy, keep it simple. Okay, I want to make it in such a way that they can accept permission for me to record them without even really understanding that I've secured their permission. Okay. Now the second part is you want to do the permission at the beginning and then again at the end. I use the same one both times because I want to make sure that there's an accurate record that we did this with their permission. We don't stop it during the middle. It's a recording at the beginning, again at the end. Good recording. If you need to use it, you can. Okay, now what sort of permission script do you want to go with? And you don't have to use a script, but I do, and I would encourage you to consider this one. It is, my name is Jerry Adair. I'm interviewing Mr. John Smith. Today is September 1st, 2018. We're conducting this interview by telephone. Mr. Smith, if you understand that we're going to record this, would you state your full name, please? Now, that's it. You'll notice that it was very short, sweet, I like to say. It didn't include a lot of extra stuff in there, and that's by design. I want to make sure that that person I get their permission to do the interview, but I made it in such a way that most of the time, all they really recognize that I'm asking them to state their name. They're focused on stating their full name, something of that nature, and they're really not cognizant of the fact that they've just given me permission to record the interview. That's what I want. I did it in a way that works for what I need, but at the same time, it doesn't put them on guard. It doesn't make them get reserved or tense or anything of that nature. It just accomplishes what I need to accomplish. Okay, now if you read through that script from the past page, you'll see that it's very succinct, short and sweet, I like to say, and there's a number of things it doesn't include in there, as I've had pointed out to me by adjusters. It doesn't include the claim information, doesn't have the insurance company name, doesn't give some scenario about the incident this is about. And I say, yeah, you're right, it doesn't. That's intentional, okay? This is a permission script. That's it. Its sole purpose is to ensure that you have that person's permission. You do that in the beginning and the end. That way you've ensured they gave you permission to record this interview. That's all it's supposed to be. It's a conversation between you and this other person. That's it. That's all that's relevant in that statement, that permission statement. It's just a script that says, I need your permission. Let's say, okay, you got it. Okay. Now, there's a reason for that. If you've done claims very long, you may have dealt with some that ended up not getting settled and went to litigation. So when litigation occurs, there's this little gamesmanship that goes on between the plaintiff attorney and the defense attorney. The plaintiff attorney, they want to get into the testimony and get in front of the jury that there's not just an incident between person A and person B, but that there's an insurance company involved with a lot of money. They make a big deal out of that. So if they're trying to get the jury to award a bunch of money, they don't want them to think it comes out of the pocket of the insurer. Maybe it's a little old lady, and they don't want the jury to think they're taking money away from her. They want them to believe that the money is coming from some wealthy insurance company over here, and that way they feel less bothered by the fact they're taking money and giving it to this other person. Okay. Conversely, the defense attorney wants to have the opposite effect. They're going to do everything in their power to keep the fact that there's an insurance claim going on or an insurance company in this matter completely away from the jury if they can. They want it to be a contest between person A and person B. They want that jury to think if they're going to award money, it's going to come out of the pocket of this person over here. And in theory, it does. It raises their insurance rates and things of that nature. So indirectly, that's true. But they don't want to get into all that. What they want to see is that the litigation be between person A and person B. So if that jury decides they're going to give money to someone, they want them to think about it as though they're taking it from one person and giving it to another. Maybe they're being more realistic, less likely to give them an exorbitant amount of money. But if they know there's an insurance company involved, then that's an entirely different scenario. So that's why the defense attorney does not want you to do anything during your investigation like introduce the name of the insurance company or mention that there is a claim investigation going on or whatever the scenario is. They don't want that as a part of this statement. They might not be able to use, or they might choose not to use this terrific statement you've taken because it brings up the subject of an insurance company involved. And maybe they've done a good job of keeping that out of the jury's, out of the testimony, so the jury doesn't really know that factually at that point. And they want to use your statement, but they look at that and go, well, if we do this, they're going to know there's an insurance company, so we're not going to use it. So you sort of defeated the whole point of getting the statement. So that's a primary reason why you really want to be careful about those kind of conversations when you're doing these statements. Leave those out. They don't belong here. There are places to talk about that, but this is not the place or the time. Now, once you actually get into the statement itself, it's just an interview, okay? And if you've done this job very much, you've interviewed people often, you ask them questions, you get information, okay? The statement is really no different. It's just a more thorough and a formal way of documenting the interview that you're having. So what I'll do is I have my questions organized to go through a process where I'll do my profile first. I'm getting their name and address and date of birth, Social Security, what they do for a living, married or single, these sort of things to help you paint a profile of that person. You know, maybe how long they've lived where they lived or how long they've worked where they work. All those kind of things are about their profile. You're helping to establish this person and whether they should know more or less about the circumstances here or not. Maybe you asked other things in terms of trying to assess whether they're an observant person or not. Okay. But there's also a point in time where you need to be willing to ask questions. It might be a little personal. Okay. It might be questions like asking somebody's date of birth or social security. Some people will take offense at that. Okay. You need to be nosy. That's how I put it, because you need to be asking the hard questions. And that's your job. Now, if they don't answer those questions, you're not responsible for that. But as an adjuster or an investigator, you are responsible for asking the question. That's your job. If you do that and they don't respond favorably, that's not something you can do anything about. You need to do your job, and don't shy away from questions because you think they might offend somebody. Okay. Secondly, don't let people control the flow of the conversation to such an extent that you don't do what you need to do. An example of this might be you ask someone about an accident, maybe it's a car accident, and you say, well, what were you doing that day when you were heading to this location? And they get off target of talking about the why and where they were going and all the details of that, and they get into their appointment to see whomever, and they get off target and start talking at length about various things, and you find yourself listening and you sort of forget where you were. Okay, that happens to all of us. That's another reason why I like to have a set of prepared questions, sort of a script, and I can check off those questions that I've asked. So when they do that, you let them talk, okay? But then you sort of take control and you say, okay, now let's go back here to where we were before. We were asking, we were talking about X. Can you take me back to X and tell me what you did there? Okay, so you let them talk. Maybe you develop some good information while they were talking that you can use. But then once you finish, or once they finish, you brought it back to where you need to be to ask those questions you need to ask. Okay. Okay, now we're into the questions during the statement. Okay, and again, as I've said before, you want to have your prepared questions, and I like to stick to my questions and the order that I put them. So I'll give some thought beforehand to the order of those questions, and there's purpose in why I do that. If I've got some difficult questions, I might wait and save those to the very end. I might try to, if I think they're talking and they're friendly, then I might keep the questions that are going to be slightly offensive and maybe change the tenor of the conversation, put those back on the very back end of it. Keep things going as well and as smoothly and as pleasantly as you can, okay? The other thing is it's okay to let them talk, okay? And sometimes they will change the subject. And that can be distracting, but it's a good thing, because the more you can get someone to just talking on their own, the more likely they're going to tell you things that you're going to find helpful. They're either going to contradict something they said earlier if they're trying to be deceitful, or maybe they're going to tell you an avenue that you might look into that you would have never even considered had they not brought it up. You just never know. So let them talk, okay? But the key point of that is to don't get distracted and start making notes so much while you're listening to them that you don't pay attention. I've had people that listen to someone tell them something really important, and the interviewer didn't pay attention, and they kept right on with their list of questions, and they didn't drill down into this information they developed, and they missed an important opportunity. Don't do that. When they're talking, listen to them. Focus on them, okay? And some people will let that affect them get rushed, affect them in their order of doing things, and they'll get rushed. What I mean by that is sometimes I'll tell people, I'm listening to them while they're talking, and I'll say, okay, bear with me. Let me make a few notes before we move on. And I'll make them pause, maybe between each question if need be. It takes as long as it takes, but don't let them rush you to the point that you're not doing a good job. You're not following your protocol. You're not making notes of what they just told you. You're getting out of order, those kind of things. So sometimes you have to slow it down, take control, say, okay, thank you, that was great. Let me make a few notes here, and then I've got something else I need to ask you, okay? Take your time, okay? It's okay. It might get a little antsy, but it's okay. It's part of the process. So listen, make notes, and then move on. Yeah, the next thing we're going to talk about is a really key, critical mistake some people make when they're taking statements, and that is they allow people to provide them with vague or non-answers, I call them, and they don't challenge people. Now, there's a way to challenge people without really trying to contradict them. So you shouldn't feel as though you have to browbeat someone into giving you the answer you want. That's not what I'm talking about. An example of this might be you ask a person you're interviewing about a car accident. How far was car X when you first saw them? How far away were they? Okay, that's a pretty straightforward question. And you'll get answers like, I have no idea, or I really don't, I can't say, I don't know. Okay. And sometimes that will be a person trying to intentionally avoid answering your question. Okay. They've been encouraged to do that or coached to do that. If they're represented by an attorney, they'll do that. Okay. So that can be happening. But more often what's happening is the person just doesn't know how to put it into practical terms. So you've got to ask suggestive or leading questions to help them out. Now, I'll do something, if it's on a distance, I'll do something like ask them a question on the extreme chart one way or the other. So was it more than 10 feet away? Oh, why, yes, it was. Okay, was it less than a mile? Yes, it was less than a mile. Good, they're trying to answer. We've got a window now, so then I just need to start narrowing that window until I get to a reasonable point. Maybe we get to within 300 or 400 feet, and that's the best they can do. That's reasonable. That's okay, all right? If they are trying to avoid answering your questions, and that's their goal, then these questions you're asking will make clear to anybody listening to this interview later, reading the transcript, that person was definitely trying to avoid answering your question. So you've accomplished that without even trying to put them on the spot. They put themselves on the spot. If they're intentionally avoiding answering those kind of questions, anybody listening can say, well, they're probably trying to hide something because they're definitely not going to answer that guy's questions, and his questions are reasonable. Okay, so that's what you're trying to do as well. All right. Now, the other thing is you don't want to let people give you an answer that is sort of left out there as vague. And an example of that might be, so did you see this person before the collision? I'm not really sure. Okay, that's not a good answer. That's not what you want. You want to clarify to them. So what you want to back up and go, okay, so are you saying you definitely did not see that person? Is that what you're saying? Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, so you're saying you did see them before the impact. Maybe it was right at the impact or close to it. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. Okay, so you did see that person before the impact. Yes, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I did see them. See, you sort of use their own words, and you're not trying to force them to say something they don't want to say, but you are trying to pin them down on an answer that they have committed to. The key part of this is that you want the person to be committed to a story. That's what this whole interview is about. They need to commit to their story. Whether it's a true story or a false story, it's their story. And they're going to be stuck with it when this interview is over because it's been recorded, and we're going to have this down as this is what you said. And we're very clear about backing up and asking questions to clarify that we understood you correctly. Okay, we're not trying to misquote you. We're just clarifying what you're saying so that you can't later say, I didn't say that. No, you did say that. And it's clear to the people watching the recording or looking at the transcript to see that you said those things. Okay, now we've talked about some of the things you do during the interview process. I want to talk about one element that you want to ensure you never do, and that is don't answer questions. This is not a question and answer session where you ask them questions and they get to ask you questions and you have an exchange of ideas. No, that's not what this is. This is their opportunity to give you their version of events and for them to answer your questions. So you don't answer their questions on this recording. That's not the time or the place. Don't do it. Now, if they ask you questions, what do? Well, I usually will try to evade the question, and I might try to ignore it. I'm older, and I can say, act like I just didn't hear them. And I went on about my questions and ignored it, hoping they'll just forget it. We can move on. So I'll typically try that first. If that doesn't happen, and they persist, maybe I'll try to gently say, well, why don't we focus on these questions here, and then I'll be happy to talk to you about that later. And if that works, great, okay? However, sometimes you try those techniques and they just don't work. They're just too persistent. They want their question answered, and they're not getting off of that until they get an answer. And if that happens, you have one choice, and that is you stop the recording and you tell them, okay, I'm going to turn the recorder off. We're going to stop this interview, okay? Now the recorder's off. I can answer your question. Here's the answer, and talk to him as much as you need to. And when you finish, you'll say, okay, have you anything else you need to ask me? I'll answer it, okay? Because when we start this recording, I'm not going to answer it. That's not my job. This is your statement. So I'll answer them now, and then we can start over and do the recording again. And once you've finished all the answers that they wanted from you, then you go back and you start at the very beginning, okay? You can't just pick up where you left off, because then it leaves the impression you left something out. Okay, so you say, we're going to go back to the beginning. My name is Jerry Adair, boom, 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 permission, everything. You're going to rehash all the things you've already done as though you didn't ask them yet. You've got to do it that way. So you have a good, solid interview with the permission at the beginning, one at the ending, and there's no broken part during the middle that's not been stopped and started again, where it leads people to conclude different things. That's not good. So you don't want to try that. You just want to start over, do it again. That's your only option. Sometimes it causes things to drag out quite a bit, but if they can persist in asking you questions, you have no alternative. Okay, now we've talked about the process to go through there and ask the questions that you want to ask and things of that nature. When you get finished with all of that, you're very near the end of the interview process. One of the things that I like to do is to let people have an opportunity to say what they want to say. So I'll throw a question out, something along the lines of, okay, is there anything that you think is relevant or appropriate about this incident that you'd like to add to your statement that I didn't ask you about? I'm opening up the floor, and you never know what they're going to say. But if there's something important, they can tell you then. And I've been surprisingly pleased that that's developed some good information. Sometimes people will tell me things that I didn't know to even ask. Maybe they saw someone talking on their cell phone during an accident while they're driving, or somebody had been using drugs and they know about this because of whatever. I mean, there's a host of things that could come out. And that's a good time to get it, because you don't always know what to ask. Despite being as thorough as you are, there are occasionally going to be things that until somebody tells you, you have no clue to go there and ask questions about it. So that's what this is designed. You want to get them to talking. The more you can have them just talking off the top of their head, the better off your statement is going to be. They're going to give you information they wouldn't have thought about, or you wouldn't have thought about, and it might lead you to a whole other set of questions which you can then jump into if they tell you something. Most of the time they'll say, no, I don't have anything to add. If they don't, then you just go to your permission at the end of the statement, like we talked about in the beginning, turn the recorder off, and you, my friend, are done. Okay, we thank you for watching the video today about taking recorded statements, and I hope you found it to be informative and helpful. And if so, please like the video on YouTube, or you can go to our website and there's a place there to comment about it. We've created a post on the message board for each video where you can post comments. Maybe you just want to read comments that someone else has posted, or you can put questions on there that someone at FreeClaimInfo would try to help you with, or someone in our claim community would jump in and help with. We've also got a host of other documents and tools, things related to recorded statements that you might find helpful in conjunction with this video. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.